So guys, sometimes when you take cuttings, you have plants that have really large leaves. A great example of that are these hydrangea cuttings right here. Now, whether it be a Hydrangea macrophylla or a Hydrangea quercifolia, which is oak leaf hydrangea, either one of those has some really large leaves. And there's something you need to do in order to help ensure that your plants root well. And that's just simply to reduce the leaf area. So that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit with you while I'm doing these hydrangea cuttings. And these are just Hydrangea macrophylla. There's a lot of varieties of this out here. This is probably one of the older versions of Endless Summer. This particular plant is one that my mom has that my dad gave her several years ago before he passed away. So, you know, that's one of the great things about cuttings is you can take a plant that meant something to you or meant something to your family, and you can propagate it and always have some of it with you. Just pass it down and give it to other family members, and there's a story behind it. So I think that's a really cool thing. But let's go back to this cutting. If you check this out, these leaves are really large. They're probably a good 5, and if you include this little stem part right here off of it, it's probably about 6 inches. Leaves all go through a process called transpiration. Transpiration is basically where water evaporates from the leaf, which pulls other water through the stem out the leaf and through the root systems. And that's one way that plants get all their water. Different things can affect transpiration, like heat, light, a lot of different things, but there's pores in these. And when you have a leaf that is too big for a root system that doesn't exist yet, you are creating a situation that makes it very difficult for the plant to get what it needs throughout the stem and to develop roots. So in this case, the answer to that is just to make some simple little cuts on the leaves to reduce the leaf area. So just like this, you can take a clean pair of scissors or pruners, whichever you have on hand, and you just do a couple little cuts here, like that. And that makes it really a lot better for that cutting to maintain its moisture capacity inside. Now this particular is in what I would call an internodal cutting. There's a lot of stem area right here, and internodal is basically, if you've got a node right here, that's where your leaves and everything come out, and it's the area between nodes. So there was a node down here where I cut it from the actual plant, and I cut it in between there. So in order to minimize the necessary amount of water and moisture and stuff in here, I'm also going to cut this down like this. So right there I've got probably a 5-inch total height on the cutting if I'm including the leaves. The stem area is probably a little around 3.25 inches or so tall. So I'm just going to take that cutting and I'm going to use a cutting just like this to put into my media, which over here is where I've got my mixture of core and sand put together. I started using that and I'm still testing it to see how I like it. It seems to be doing pretty well because it does a good job of holding the moisture in the pot at the same time allowing it to drain freely. So that's really good. Now these are just 4-inch nursery pots that I've saved over the years, so I'm just going to put a little bit in here. And the sand, I get this question a lot. I generally will use paver sand, play sand, or builder sand. Any of those sands seem to work fine for doing cuttings. The key with sand is you want something that's going to be a nice, well-draining mixture that doesn't have a whole lot of organic matter in it that can contaminate your cuttings. And so with each of these cuttings, I'm just going to take them into my rooting hormone here. Hydrangeas do not need rooting hormone. I just use it sometimes in order to improve rooting. And plus, if you were using this on another type of plant, it might be helpful to see that process. So, and I'm going to use this. I don't always use a Dber. Sometimes I just stick these in. But this is just a little kid's paintbrush that I grabbed, and it makes a really good Dber. So what a Dber does is it creates a hole in the pot, the medium, and allows you to slide your cutting in without losing the rooting hormone on it. So I'm going to push that in about halfway. I'll water here in a little while once I've got these cuttings taken care of. But I'm basically going to go through that process on each of these. Now on this particular one, I actually am going to do something a little different. I'm going to actually snip these large leaves off entirely because I've got some pretty nice little new growth leaves here that are much smaller and should be just right for what I need. So I'm just doing it that way, and we'll do the sticking just like this. So here you can see the 2 cuttings we've got there sliding in, and to show you a little closer, here's basically all that does is it creates a little channel for me to slide in a cutting for. So, and you can see how wilty these already are, and that's because they're losing moisture pretty quickly. So it's best to get your cuttings done as quickly as you can. And for transport, here's what I did, because this was at my mom's house and not at mine. I took some saran wrap, whatever, plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it, put some paper towels down, and then wrap them in this to maintain moisture around the bottom of the cutting. And it's not perfect. Right there I had a Caryopteris fall out, but in here I've got a couple Hydrangeas, some Caryopteris. I had some willow also that I took cuttings from and did the same thing. So again there, I trimmed the leaves, I cut the stem down a little bit, plus it gives me a nice fresh spot there for that cutting. Now, some plants will root fine from internodal cuttings, just like these. The Hydrangeas do really well doing that. But other plants, you need to have a node there at the bottom for them to grow roots off of. Plants like grapevines do need to have some sort of a node at the bottom. There's a lot of different ones. So you test and see. If you are in doubt, just go with a nodal cutting, and it should be fine either way. But the nice thing about when you go internodal on these cuttings, and see here's another one where I'm going to go with the small leaves and not the big leaves. I'll just trim those off, and that'll be what I have. But the nice thing about internodal cuttings is you can actually get more cuttings out of each plant that you are taking cuttings from. And here we are. So we got 4 cuttings in that little 4-inch pot. And we'll go ahead and do another one because I've got several more here to do. Now if you cut the bottom portion at a slight angle, that creates a little more surface area for callousing to happen. Callousing is that process where it starts to heal at the end of that, and that's where all those growth cells are going to happen, and that's where roots will start to come out from. So it's a good thing to do that if you can. It's not critical necessarily. I've done a lot of cuttings where it's just flat on the bottom and I didn't have any trouble with it. Hydrangeas tend to be extremely easy to root plants, and I hesitate to say that sometimes because a lot of times what's easy for one person in one climate and one garden is hard for someone in a different circumstance. So not everything works out all the time. The best thing to do is try a lot of different things and see what works best for you. This cutting here is a little different. It's got 2 nodes here, so the top of it is very floppy, and this was just definitely younger foliage on the plant. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a nodal cutting of this one. I'm going to snip that off, get rid of those 2 leaves on the bottom, take off this larger leaf, and then for here I think I want to take this one off also. Now in the center you see this terminal bud up here. That's those leaves coming off that side. I'm going to pinch that off. If you have a terminal bud and you pinch it off, it allows the growth to center itself along this area. It kind of sends a signal down saying we need to grow down here and not up here. So once you do that, then I'm going to use this entire cutting so I can keep that node on the bottom. And then we'll do the same thing. Now when you're using rooting hormone, I do recommend putting this into another container so you're not contaminating other cuttings. I'm almost at the end of my container here, so I'm not worrying about it too much. But it's always a good idea to keep things clean and separated. Alright, so right there I've got 7 of those hydrangea cuttings. We should expect pretty good rooting off of those. And we'll see. What I'm going to do next is these are going to go into a flat under some grow lights in a climate controlled area where they are not going to be exposed to sun and wind and weather changes that we get around here frequently. So one of the most important things when you're taking cuttings of any kind is that you don't want your cuttings to dry out. If they dry out, they're probably not going to work. So do what you can to prevent the process of transpiration from taking away all the moisture out of the plants. Make sure you're keeping them in an environment where they've got a little bit of humidity. A lot of times you can put a bag over top of your cuttings if you don't have a very humid area, or you can mist them with a sprayer. A lot of people will install a big fancy mist system. I've never actually used one of those, but I am very interested in getting one set up at some point. So to prevent transpiration from taking away all the moisture, make sure that you are trimming up those leaves a little bit. This is good for the long-term health of the plant. Each one of these cuttings will start regrowing branches and leaves off of the nodes that are up here on the upper portion of the plant, and they will do just fine when you trim them a little bit. In fact, this will actually help them quite a bit. So I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Hope this was interesting and helpful. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.